cool is that? Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I am Ed McCann. I'm the founder of Writers Read, and I'm going to be your host today for our special Mother's Day event. Our mission is to create and promote performance opportunities for writers, and whether they're established or emerging, whether they are published or not, because it's all about the craft and about a writer's ability to relate an engaging personal narrative. As many of you know, the maximum length of submissions for the work that we do is 650 words, which translates to a 5-minute spoken word frame. And that is just 2 double-spaced pages, which doesn't seem like a lot, but you'll be surprised what you can really squeeze into those 2 pages. And the talented writers who you're going to meet today, we're going to show you just how that's done. We are delighted to return again to City Winery's beautiful flagship location here in Manhattan, on the West Side, to spend a couple of hours together with you, celebrating writers and celebrating mothers. So thanks for joining us this afternoon to support good writing and the spoken word. For most of us, our mother is our first love. She is also, for a time, our entire world, serving as our protector, our nurturer, and our teacher. And our relationships with our mothers are elemental, and yet they can also be the most fraught and complicated relationships we will ever know. From the dozens of submissions we received on this topic, our editorial team has selected a rich and varied selection on mothering and motherhood, told from wildly varying perspectives, to share with you today. So we're going to jump right into it. Fran Tunno is a copywriter, she's a blogger, and she's a voice actress. And it's the kind of multitasking career that kept her in the game during the many years she lived and worked in Los Angeles. You may recognize Fran's voice from one of the countless ads or many audiobooks she's recorded. Her blog has won a Blog Her Voices of the Year award, and she's published essays in the LA Times, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, LA Gazzetta Italiana, and elsewhere. She's also a maniacal baker and cook, and former morning radio personality who has survived mothering 3 children who, she says, seem surprisingly well-adjusted. Fran recently returned to Pittsburgh to be closer to her Italian family and, of course, for the food. And in The Power of Love and Pizza, the story she brings to us today, Fran describes how her Italian immigrant mother's culinary talents resonated well beyond their kitchen. Please give a very warm welcome to Fran Tunno.
When I was a teenager in the 1970s, the combination of my mom's thick Italian accent, lack of education, 1940s hairstyle, booming voice, and obesity made me cringe when friends were around. So I did not want my mom to attend Mother-Daughter Night, sponsored by the Girls Athletic Association. I said something snotty like, "Oh, girls and their moms will be in the gym. They'll be running around in shorts and playing volleyball and basketball. I don't know what you do there, but you can come if you want." She couldn't hide the disappointment in her voice. "You don't want me there. I'll look like a bigger buffalo with all of those skinny mothers." With resignation and attempted cheer, she added, "It's okay, honey. You go without me. Have a good time." A good daughter would have felt terrible, but I was relieved. I knew she wouldn't be able to play like the other mothers, and I didn't want everyone knowing my mom was more like everyone's grandmother. Plus, she was always telling people how wonderful I was, and I was afraid people would laugh at us. So my mom stayed home, and I went to GAA night with my best friend, Carolyn, her young, thin mother, and a little something my mom sent. All night, I watched mothers in blue jeans and shorts leaping acrobatically as they played volleyball. While I played, my self-absorbed teenage brain kept thinking, why can't my mother be cool like this? Why did she have to wait until she was 42 to have me? Why does she have to be overweight, and why does she still have that dumb accent? I felt low and alone all night. Then it was time to eat. The little something my mom sent was 2 pizzas the size of large cookie sheets. She'd baked them the day before, and they became her ambassadors. After we played, we settled in the gym bleachers for snacks. I brought out the pizzas my mother carefully wrapped in aluminum foil. I checked them for weird ingredients because occasionally I'd come home, smell something good and garlicky, open the oven door, and recoil at the sight of a split head of a goat sizzling away. Since Mom never wasted anything, I had to make sure she hadn't slipped a goaty surprise into a pizza. They checked out. I sliced them, passed them around, and waited, hoping people liked them. Things were quiet. And then I heard whispers. Mothers, daughters, even the gym teacher started asking about the pizza. Who brought it? Who made it? And where could they get more? They raved about it, telling me how lucky I was. They said none of them ever got delicious homemade pizza like this. In minutes, my mother became the most famous mother in GAA history without touching a volleyball. With the oohs and ahs echoing through the gym, you'd have thought these people had never tasted pizza. I went from feeling like a pathetic orphan to the luckiest teenager in New Brighton. And the pizza wasn't even hot. It was cold, day-old pizza. At that moment, I made a vow. I'll never resent my mother for who she is and what she doesn't do. She does something just as important as the normal moms. She's simply in a category all her own. Later, I sat alone in the bleachers, staring at the brightly lit gym floor, and felt ashamed. I felt guilty for all the times I'd wished my mom had been someone cooler, someone normal, someone younger, someone skinnier, someone more American, someone who didn't roast goat heads. When I got home and told her everyone loved her pizza and how lucky they said I was, she was beaming. It was the start of a new chapter.
Christine Koubek Flynn is the mother of sons. She's a writer, a teacher, and a caffeinated runner who loves working with people in writing workshops, including through the Armed Services Arts Partnership. She was adopted and raised in New York, but was born in Massachusetts, where she lived in her 20s, a time that turned her into, she's almost afraid to admit this here, a Red Sox fan. Christine holds an MFA in creative writing from Fairfield University, and her work has appeared in the Washington Post and Poets and Writers. She's received awards from the American Society of Journalists and Authors, as well as the Elizabeth George Foundation for her novel In Progress. She traveled from her home in Maryland to join us this afternoon, and in her essay, Baby from the Back Row, Christine explores adoption and the power of the mother-child bond from its earliest moments, as well as its endurance, regardless of time, distance, and separation. Please say hello to Christine Koubek Flynn.
We spend nearly 40 weeks of our lives underwater.
From the top.
We spend nearly 40 weeks of our lives underwater, in a cocoon of warmth and darkness. The experts say we develop faster in the womb than at any other time in our lives, and that we spend those final weeks absorbing noises and smells, sensing our mother's moods, and gathering intel on our soon-to-be environment. If this is true, then I'm sure I sense from within that first clandestine space that something was amiss. I might have had an inkling that my mother was an uptown girl, her plaid pleated skirt swishing side to side as she hurried through the hallways of her all-girls Catholic school in upstate New York. I bet my heartbeat raced with her the day a classmate caught her vomiting in the bathroom. The school nurse called her mother. The voices that night were furious. And again 2 days later, when her parents found us sitting on a park bench with the boy who was my father. She and I were 4 months together by then, and on a bus the next day destined for her older sister's house in Maryland, she with a phony wedding ring and her father's parting instructions: tell anyone who asks that your husband is in Vietnam. Upheaval marked the end of each trimester. First, the move to Maryland, then to Massachusetts, a sequestered place in the valley of the Berkshire Mountains, where there were suddenly many more voices that sounded like hers. As the weeks wore on and I grew larger, we were two parts of one whole. I was a place to rest her forearms as she learned to knit soft scarves, a muse for the poems I would one day read, and a captive audience as her fingers raced across piano keys, practicing Chopin, Rachmaninoff, and Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Sometimes she hummed along. Her music and alto voice were the soundtrack for my growing limbic system, the part of me primed to hear and smell which person in a room full of strangers was her. She had a stomach ache after eating formerly forbidden chocolate on Halloween night. She thought it was indigestion. I was born the next day. I imagine I was lulled by all that felt familiar in the moments my mother held me close. She touched each of my fingers and toes. And then the connection with her, the music, stopped. What happened next, I would discover many years later, happened to more than 2 million babies born in America in the decades before Roe v. Wade. She returned home from the hospital and told her friends that she was finally over a horrific case of mono. I was swaddled in a blanket and placed in one of the hospital nursery's back row bassinets, alongside the other illegitimates, or bastards, as the not-so-kind called us. Wanted babies, those born to married couples, lined the front rows. I spent my first trimester out of the womb at an orphanage. By January's end, a nun dressed in black and white handed my adoptive parents an amended birth certificate, placed me in my new mother's arms, and said, "Here, it's as if you gave birth to her yourself." They thought we were blank slates. I still wonder sometimes who took care of all those babies, who held us and fed us before we were adopted. There are no stories, no notes on first smiles. I realized this in the middle of one cloudless night as I breastfed my newborn son near my bedroom window. His little fist reached up and clung to a curl of my hair as if to say, I belong to you." I studied his round pink face, illuminated by the moonlight. I touched each of his sausage-shaped toes. A chill swept through me as I imagined untangling my hair from his fingers to hand him over, never to smell his powdery soft skin again, or know the person he would become. And I wondered what it was like for my first mother, for Anne. How do you surrender your baby? How do you live a life entangled in secrets and shame? And what does it do to a person, to us, in the end?
Rachel Horowitz's childhood took place variously in Washington, D.C., Boston, San Francisco, L.A., and Bogota, before finally settling in Vail, Colorado at age 13. Later, she translated her degree in English literature into a successful publishing career in New York. Over the last 20 years, she's worked at Scholastic, Doubleday, and she's currently at HarperCollins Children's Books. She's also been a literary agent and literary scout for, among other clients, Netflix. Rachel nurtures her own work with the support of her monthly writing group, and she lives here in Manhattan with her husband, their two teenagers, and a 4-legged menagerie that includes 2 cats, a dog, and a turtle. In her story, Vitamin C, Reds, and Cocaine, Rachel tells how her mom's devotion to rock and roll, including such legendary bands as the Grateful Dead, has no age limit. Please welcome Rachel Horowitz.
I caught her checking herself out in the antique mirror in my hallway, clearly proud of the way her angular face looked as she lifted her chin to the right, channeling the movie star inside. Not a diet I'd recommend, though, she said that day, acknowledging the irony of looking beautiful and sick at once. She was sick, really sick this time. Her platelets were down, she was taking long naps, mixing vitamin drinks to strengthen the immune system that was betraying her. That day, we were to meet a friend of mine for lunch. Mom was wearing a Bob Dylan concert tee with purple and white athletic shorts over purple tights and long white knee socks with purple stripes. She looked like a hippie cheerleader for the Harlem Globetrotters. My legs were cold, she'd explained to me on the way over, as if that made it right. Friends who would meet my mom, the best ones, would always give me a hug afterwards. Most people just thought she was cool. Who else had a mother who'd managed a US tour for the Moody Blues, traveled with Frank Zappa, he got me every job I ever had, she liked to say, toured with Joan Armatrading. Many of my early memories are of me and my sister sleeping on couches under coats backstage, although recently I made the mistake of referring to her as a groupie, and she corrected me sharply. Groupies suck dick, she said. I worked for the band. We walked into the restaurant, a wide open space with a painted ceiling and cafe tables filled with people dressed smartly in black pants and pressed collared shirts. This was the fancy patisserie on Madison Avenue, where my friend worked. I caught his eye and he waved us over, where another friend, Becky, was waiting. Mom liked to go places where we knew people. She liked to be surrounded by a tribe. Michelle, so good to see you, Becky said. You look great. What's your secret? Vitamin C, Reds, and cocaine, Mom replied loudly. I'd long shed my adolescent embarrassment of her, something she continued to challenge long past my teenage years. It seemed as if all the smartly dressed patrons turned to look at us at once. What? She said, taking off her scarf and putting it over her chair. What in the world ever became of Sweet Jane? Truckin'? The Grateful Dead? Who doesn't know the Grateful Dead? The last part was said for the entire restaurant to hear. Many hours later, coffees for us, pressed juice for my mom, the afternoon sun was waning, and the wide, white room was almost empty. Mom reached into her giant purse. She wanted to take us out, she said. Yet instead of pulling out her wallet, she fished out a folded piece of paper. Look, she waved it back and forth, a medicinal marijuana prescription I haven't yet cashed in. I looked over to Becky, who shot up an eyebrow in response. How else do you score? Mom asked aloud to no one in particular, then paused for effect. When you're 61. Mom, what? I could never be a drug addict, she said with conviction, then paused to catch herself. Well, an intravenous one. She often seemed proud of her candor, the way liars are, every now and then, when they strike on the truth. Later that night, she took out her arsenal of pills, the Procrit and interferon, the Percodan for the pain, prescribed this time by a real doctor. She sat on my blue and white striped couch, shivering from the medicine, holding up a small hand mirror, setting herself in profile, her hands all knuckles and rings, applying a thick line of rouge to each of her Mia Farrow cheekbones. Then she turned to me, batted her eyelashes, and smiled.
Jeanne-Marie Fleming is a writer who taught special education in public schools for 25 years. She's currently a fiction editor at Variant Literature Journal, a reader at Lumina Journal, and a writing mentor for the incarcerated through Transforming Lives New York. In her own writing, published in various literary anthologies, Jeanne-Marie explores the many ways humans cope with each other. She wanted us to know that her mother, Dorothy, who is 80 years old, plays pickleball 3 days a week. And Jeanne-Marie's essay, Muted Colors, Messy Table, brings us smack into the middle of the loving chaos of her childhood, including her athletic mother, who proves there's always much more than meets the eye. I'm also delighted to tell you that just yesterday, Jeanne-Marie graduated from Sarah Lawrence College with an MFA in creative writing. So, yes, please congratulate and welcome Jeanne-Marie Fleming.
It's dinner time on Long Island. My father, a cop, is working the 3 to 11, and the baby sleeps in his carrier. The 2-year-old, perched in the high chair, presses beats into his hair. Veronica, across the table, sings and animates wheels on the bus, while Eddie rocks on a thick phone book and mimics the motion of beep, beep, beep. The oldest, Diane, says, "Quit that stupid song." I'm in 5th grade. I'm telling Mom about Artie Campanelli, who sells Hubba Bubba and Wacky Packs out of his desk. I wait for her to comment, but she stares straight ahead and doesn't speak. I turn toward the glass sliders of our converted porch to see what Mom is gazing at. The sky has darkened, and the scene around us, around our messy table, reflects in a pool of muted colors. "Mom," I ask. Her blue eyes don't blink. It is as though she has left us. "Say something, Mom," I plead. My sisters turn and see Mom frozen like a marble statue. "What's wrong, Mom?" Diane shrieks. A state of alarm ensues, and we beg her back to us, to our kitchen on Lyndale Street. We need our mother to clean up Stephen, put the baby to bed, wash the pots, give Diane a towel for drying, hand me a broom, and help Eddie into his pajamas. We need her to settle us down and turn out the lights so we can all sleep. We'll need Mom to spearhead us out of this tiny house in a few years and get a job kicking butt, selling real estate, so we can afford to go to college and have opportunities she never had. We'll need her to tell us 1,000 times how we should be grateful and always take the higher road. We need her to do the thing where she drops us at the mall and says, "I'll be back in an hour. You better have jobs." Mom might have zoned out for 60 seconds or a few minutes. I'll never know. It was the mid-70s, and maybe she had heard about meditation, about stillness and freeing the mind. Why did she choose the middle of dinner that night, an ordinary evening? I do remember when Mom's eyes glassed over, I suddenly heard how loud we all were. I mean, I could hear the cacophony and perceive the chaos in that kitchen. There were pots on the stove with large spoons sticking out of them, baby bottles lined up next to the sink, and nipples drying on the rack. On the counter, between a pile of bills and an empty box of powdered milk, Eddie's black shoes waited for a polish. A yellow bib had fallen on the floor next to a Tonka dump truck that held a single sneaker. And behind the high chair, a thin pattern pinned to purple material, a dress in the making, was strewn over the sewing machine. It was the first time I had an inkling of Mom's vulnerability. The first time I imagined her needing something beyond us. Always in motion, the last to sit at the table, the first to get up. A dish towel over one shoulder, a baby over the other. Our home was neat, our clothes were clean, and we always had either bologna, peanut butter and jelly, or a cold fried egg sandwich in our lunch bag. Our young mother, just 33 with 6 children, she made do. Maybe that night she entertained the possibility of leaving all of us. Perhaps she dreamed of a different sort of life. All I know is Mom checked out for a bit. And in that moment, that terrifying moment, I came to understand there was a part of her that existed separate from the role of sacrificial wife and mother. Shrouded in mystery, She was a woman I could not fully know.
Lynn Edelson divides her writing time between memoir and short stories. Her work is widely anthologized, and earlier this year, Lynn was a finalist for the Eunice Williams Nonfiction Prize for her piece, In the Company of Women. She's the mother of 2 grown sons, one a writer and the other a musician. And despite years of dropping hints, she's fairly certain neither of them is ever going to buy her a beach house. Still, hope springs eternal, and in the meantime, she lives in the Hudson Valley with her husband and their 2 dogs, both of which, she says, shed far too much. In Roast Chicken, her contribution to our special Mother's Day event, Lynn returns to the stage to tell us how she tentatively pushed some maternal boundaries, only to discover that love really has no bounds. Please welcome Lynn Edelson back to the Writers' Read stage. Lynn.
What are you guys having for dinner tonight, I ask. My daughter-in-law looks up from her phone. I don't know. She is sitting on the small couch in the small apartment with the small baby in her arms. The 2-month-old is frequently attached to one of her mother's large pink nipples. I only intended to stay for lunch. I had planned to walk through the tree-lined streets of their stroller-filled Brooklyn neighborhood, pick up the sushi she loves, and then give her some space. I'm good, she had told me that morning. Only come down if you want to. If I want to? 90 minutes of dodging trucks and those crazy cars with New Jersey plates, the ones who never signal? I want to. I want to sit close by and gaze at that baby and make sure they're both okay. My son has gone back to work after paternity leave, and this is her solo flight. I am not her mother, but she is part of my flock. And then there is that baby, the one who smiles at me from her mother's arms and reluctantly allows me to hold her from time to time. It's a dicey dance. Does she really want me there, or would she prefer to do this alone? But as the day goes on, I can see her wearing thin. I kicked myself for not having shown up with the bags of food I usually cook to stuff into their tiny fridge. Pasta, maybe? I say. She tilts her head. I don't know, she says. Maybe? Yeah, pasta would be fine. She doesn't want pasta. I can take something out of the freezer, she says. It's 2:00. Too late to defrost anything. How about if I go pick something up, I say. She shifts the baby to the other breast. Maybe chicken, I offer. They have been inundated with chicken. Chicken sounds good, she murmurs. How about if I pick up a chicken and roast it so you have it when I leave? You're not staying for dinner, she says. How about if I pick up 2 chickens so you have enough for leftovers? I walk 4 blocks to the butcher and the overpriced grocery and head back to their building. The chickens and potatoes, as well as the zucchini she is worried my son will not like because it can get mushy, are cooked by 5:30. Don't worry about him, I tell her. He'll be relieved there's food on the table. She smiles. She has finished nursing. The baby is asleep in the bedroom, and she's feeling relieved. Until we hear the rustling over the monitor, until she realizes she can no longer just sit on the couch and relax. I don't know what else to do, she says softly. She doesn't want to play, she doesn't want to eat, and she doesn't want to sleep. Want me to try? I say slowly. She looks at me. You want to? We both know this baby barely likes me. Oh, I make her smile, I make her laugh, but she only wants her mama. Of course, I say. Oh, Jesus, I'm saying to myself, here we go. I venture into the darkened bedroom and see her fussing in the dappled light, tears glistening on her cheeks. I pick her up, and she doesn't fight me. She cries while I hold her against my shoulder, waiting for her to find the crook of my neck. You're not my mother, she whimpers. I know, I whisper, but I'm the best you got right now. I walk her and rock her until my back is aching. And finally, she settles in. She melts like chocolate into my arms, and at last, I feel it. That thing I've been waiting for. That thing that has been missing for the past 2 months. She is mine, too.
Mihai Grunfeld was born in Cluj, Romania, where he lived under the repressive Ceausescu regime until he was 18. And that was when he staged a daring escape, traveling to Czechoslovakia, the beginning of a long journey that took him to Israel, Italy, Sweden, and Canada in search of a home in the West. Eventually, he settled in the US, where he obtained his PhD from UC Berkeley, and he recently retired from Vassar College, where he taught Spanish and Latin American literature. Mihai's memoir, Leaving, Memories of Romania, recounts that experience, and together with Sarah Levine Simon, he adapted his novel into the play, The Dressmaker's Secret, which enjoyed a successful run here in New York City. In his essay, The Compass, Mihai discovers that presence and absence are much closer than they appear, whether in the same room or on the other side of the world. Please help me welcome back to our stage, Mihai Grunfeld.
You were at the hospital. That Sunday, when I came to say goodbye, there was a foot of snow on the ground. The guard looked at me with hard eyes. I told him it was important. I was leaving on a trip abroad. But he answered without even raising his head. Visitors are only allowed on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 1 to 5. Then he turned around. He turned away. I went around the block, climbed over the tall brick wall, and made my way to the ground, through the grounds, to the room on the second floor. You looked asleep when I called your name, but you opened your eyes, saw me at the door, and smiled brightly. Mishika, you said softly, you came. I remember how pale and your yellowish skin was, and how slowly you sat up. We hugged. You took your thick winter coat, and we went for a walk on the grounds, even though I was afraid the guard might recognize me. I was quiet, but I burned to tell you that I was leaving you, that I was going to Czechoslovakia to try to escape, to leave the country and never return. That we may never see each other again. But I couldn't tell you that, so I didn't say anything. We were walking slowly along the path between the tall, leafless chestnut trees. A cold wind was blowing, and I thought you might be shivering. I helped you button the top of your coat and put my arm around your shoulders. I could feel your frail body, your bones under the coat. You leaned your head on my shoulders. Are you ready? You asked. I nodded. We're leaving tomorrow morning. They didn't allow us to exchange much money for the trip, so I bought a few things to sell in Budapest and Prague. I will bring you something nice, I said. But what I wanted to say out loud was that I was leaving, that I had to live my own life, that you've lived yours, and now it was my turn. I know it wasn't easy for you. I know you barely survived Auschwitz and saw your parents and your sister Ilyana being taken away, killed. You never spoke to me about that. But when you returned, you did have your second chance at life with Tata. You had 2 children, me and my brother. Now it's my time, Mama. I'm 19 and I have a chance to escape, to have a life, my life. This is my opportunity, and it'll never come again, so I have to go. Don't worry about me, you said. I don't need anything. You lied, too. You died 6 months after I left. Did you ever forgive me for abandoning you? Now I have time. For 40 years, I looked ahead. I had to find my life, my place, myself through many countries. Now I can feel you in my chest, here on the left side, a sharp pain, telling me how you felt when I left, telling me your pain. I don't need to earn a living any longer now to take care of my family, so I have time to remember your short hair and your sad eyes. I need you to know that I carried you in my heart all this time, even if I didn't remember. Can you see that I kept my compass and did not get lost, that I have a good profession and a beautiful family, and I give my children as much love as you gave me, as you taught me. You can be proud of me. I think I did all this for both of us, even if I didn't always know it. And now that the sunset is getting closer, I need your help, Mama. Please, bless me and let me go.
Though Karen Multer has called Chicago home for many years, she's never quite been able to shake her Wisconsin roots, growing up in the backwaters of the Mississippi River. As a writer, singer, and composer, Karen has written everything from chewing gum jingles and musical theater to short stories and essays. And she's a longtime Dramatists Guild Fellow whose work has been featured at the Kennedy Center Page to Stage Festival. Her original music can be heard on projects for HBO, Netflix, and Amazon Originals, and she's published in Cutleaf Journal and the Black Fork Review. Among all her accomplishments, she's proudest of her role as mother to 2 incredible daughters. In her story, The Pickpocket, Karen shows us how the metaphor, time is a thief, is less literary device and more an inescapable condition. She wins today's Longest Commute Award, having traveled all the way from Chicago to share her story on our stage. Please say hello to Karen Multer.
Her fingernails were smaller than ladybug wings the first time I saw her, the one we called pumpkin flower. The attending doctor in the NICU said her lungs needed a little more time and that she wouldn't always be this orange. She came home 10 days later, already hell-bent and negotiating for more space. She slept under a tree, and on her walls, the circus was in town. We kept vigil, along with the elephants and dancing giraffe, counting the breaths. I turned away for a moment to poach an egg, and when I looked back, she was tying her own shoes. I went out to get the mail and came inside to find her crying over the beautiful Mexican boy who'd just broken her heart. I took off the last of my mascara, and just like that, she was gone, asking me to send her warm winter coat because the weather would be changing soon. Time is a pickpocket who steals with impunity and then smiles as we search for what has been taken. I have often been a careless mother. This is not to say that I cared less, merely that I was less careful. There were days when she was left to her own devices, crawling on the floor, ignored, while I did the crossword. What's a four-letter word for indifferent? M-A-M-A. I filled in the boxes as she patted my knee with sticky fingers. I reminded myself that there are many ways to mother. I tried to show myself the same grace I'd show anyone else, but we are always hardest on ourselves. The pumpkin flower was a storm whose eye never lasted quite long enough. A girl of no less than 3 callings before the braces even came off. First, she was the tour guide with a steady stream of bright chatter, pointing to the left and right with her wooden spoon microphone. Then, the weaver of tales with stories that wrapped and wound and had no end. Finally, she was the gatekeeper. She closed the door, the sole arbiter of who was in and who was out. And if you made it past the velvet rope, it was as though the music played for you alone. Now I stand in the bedroom, and the scent of her is still here, lingering in the sheets I've yet to wash. So careless. I come to this room often to look for what has been stolen and what remains. I take inventory while the pickpocket watches from the corner next to the broken guitar. He's waiting for his chance to pore over the leavings and rob me of what is rightfully mine. But today, I am careful. I find the giraffe hiding among the socks and winter wear. He left the circus years ago, or was it last Wednesday, and has been here ever since. I wrap a woolen scarf around his neck and add him to the lockbox of memories whose key has been taped to the bottom. The box is stuffed with ribbons and trinkets and ticket stubs and discarded bits. The pickpocket wants it all. I know he's behind me, sizing me up. I turn to meet his gaze. He's the first one to blink. And when he does, I swallow the key.
Writers Read is a nonprofit literary organization with a mission to create and promote performance opportunities for writers. And in a publishing environment where it's often challenging to find or hear new voices, we take that mission seriously, and we've worked hard to create this quality platform for writers and an entertaining and memorable experience for you, our friends and our guests. At a time when the world around us can feel so negative and uncertain, gathering like this to share stories and fellowship and wine can feel like a real gift and something that really does nourish us all. Our volunteer editorial team places a strong emphasis on the craft of writing, and they read dozens and sometimes over 100 submissions on each topic before selecting the stories we present and record at events like this one. Many of those recordings have a second life in the podcast we launched as part of Carnegie Hall's Spring Festival back in 2021. And I looked at my records, and I think this is show number, it's either 39 or 40, our 40th live show today. I am proud of what we're building, and I encourage you to follow our half-hour podcast. Each episode features 3 stories from our themed events, like this one, plus a meditation or essay from a writer on writing and the writing life. And that's something we call Between the Lines. And that's anything from all the ways you've discovered to procrastinate, where you get your ideas, how you write on a legal pad, but just there's very interesting pieces that come when we put that prompt out there. And those are pieces that you don't have to appear on our stage to present. Very often people will record them on their smartphone and send them in via email. And I'll just tell you very briefly, early on, Suzanne McConnell had contributed a piece about her time at the Iowa Writers Workshop when Kurt Vonnegut was her instructor, and telling the students that, that they were in the entertainment business and what that meant for her. And conversely, we featured Sally Schwartz, who's a humor columnist for the Chicago Tribune, who wrote, "I cannot write if it's not quiet. I need it to be absolutely quiet for me to write. I also can't write if the dishwasher hasn't been unloaded. I can't write if my hair isn't tied back." It was like all those ways, but so it was humorous, but like really anything that even tangentially connects to what it means to be a writer is very much welcome. Our volunteer team is working with me to scale up to attract more writers, more followers, more listeners, and to establish a home on public radio, which is a change that will make the words of these talented writers available to an even broader audience. We're largely self-funded, and I've always believed the return on the investment of all this time and energy and effort and money would come from sponsorship and underwriting when we get there, and we're not there yet, but we're at an inflection point. But we really do depend on donations and contributions, and while a portion of the tickets you purchase for today's show flows through to us from City Winery, our primary funding does come from you, our friends and our donors, and those funds help offset some of our basic operating costs, and we are a 100% volunteer organization. So if you're enjoying today's show and you'd like to help us grow, your donations are an investment in our mission to create these opportunities for writers, and they will help take us to the next level. So please do consider a tax-deductible donation today in any amount to help us get there. There's a scannable code on the back of your program to make it easy, with options for a credit card or PayPal and an address where you could mail a check. So I do thank you for your encouragement and support and for being here this afternoon, because we just can't do what we do without you. And so thank you. Thanks to all the people who made this day possible, from the folks here in the house, the servers who are helping keep us watered and fed, and Dan here on audio. I'm grateful for my partner and Writers Read executive producer Richard Kolath, to our editors David Masello, Lisa Donati-Meyer, Rhonda Zangwill, Stephen Lewis, of course, and our production manager, chief technology officer, and troubleshooter Sarah Caldwell, who is dealing with the cameras and such today. So thank you, and thank all of them with their very own hand. Let's do that. So to open Act 2 today, we present Hasna Mohammed. She is a photographer, she's an educator, and she's a writer whose work focuses on family, social justice, education, and the human condition. She has exhibited her photography around the country, and she's widely published, including her first book, Breathe in the Sky, Poems, Prayers, and Photographs. As an education activist, Hasna served as an English and writing teacher, a principal, and an assistant superintendent. She's also taught executive leadership, diversity management, and engagement at the graduate level. An alumna of Sarah Lawrence College, Hasna lives in Brewster, New York, where she and her husband raised their 3 children. She's been a fellow at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, and she's a member of the Harlem Writers Guild. And we're delighted Hasna is here to tell us about her mother, a woman who many of us remember as a wonderful actress, but whose talents extended far beyond the stage. Here to present her story, ahead of her time, please give a warm welcome to Hasna Mohammed.
My mother was a survivalist, environmentalist, and way ahead of her time. Someday, she told me, you're going to need to know how to survive because something is going to happen. To Mom, survival meant being tough and resourceful. Mom grew up poor, Black, and female during the Great Depression and developed a deep-seated fear of never having enough food, money, or basic resources. Eventually, she became financially stable, but she was scared to be without. She saved everything, abhorred waste, and used reduce, reuse, recycle long before it became a lexicon of saving the planet. Mom prepared us to survive. We didn't have to survive the urban streets like she did. We had to survive the violent, egotistical, and greediness of our species. She instilled in us a sense of connection to and responsibility for each other and the Black community. She taught us the skills that enabled us to engage with ladies' room attendants at the theater, C-suite executives, and beggars on the street. She taught us how to be safe during a protest or in encounters with the police. Her brother taught us martial arts movements just in case we were attacked. Her gifts were always practical items like water purifiers, first aid kits, battery-operated radios, and books like Preparedness Now, an emergency survival guide for civilians and their families. Mom would often say, I could make a this out of that. And she turned something into something else. She taught us to take up a hem and had Dad teach us how to change a tire. She taught us to open cans without a can opener and how to build a fire. She kept collections of candles, lanterns, flashlights, safety pins, jars, matches, and cash, just in case. We even had a set of metal camping cookware, canteens and all. Whenever we lost power, my mother lit candles and life went on as usual, much to our dismay. We were able to do our homework during the 1965 Great Northeast Blackout. Even the Northeast Blackout of 2003 and Superstorm Sandy were no match for my mother. She taught us the importance of eating well and having an independent food supply, which for us included a garden that we all worked and fruit from the apple, blackberry, and pear trees that we picked in the yard. She prepared jams and froze vegetables for the winter months. She stored canned and powdered food that turned into sustenance with the addition of the distilled water that she saved. We ate plant-based meals on Tuesdays, drank fresh squeezed juices, ate homemade yogurt, and composted the leftovers. Mom repurposed everything. She put eggshells in the water we used to water the plants, and she reused the egg cartons to start plants from seeds. An empty coffee can became the emergency toilet in the car. Old scripts were dismantled and turned into notepads. She used pencils to the nub and pens until they were void of ink. She wrote a letter to me so that she could use the piece of paper that she didn't want to throw away. My mother, activist, actor Ruby Dee, prepared me for these days of global warming and societal pestilence, insecurity, and uncertainty long before the path of 2020 unfolded. Because of her, I know how to survive. I know how to protect myself and my family, and I can teach others to do the same. I know how to grow my own food, manage without electricity, and I am prepared to be self-reliant. I keep a stash of foods, tools, flashlights, and candles, some of which belong to her. These days, whenever I have to read by firelight during a storm, whenever I have to use stored water to bathe, whenever I reuse plastic bags, tear paper towels in half, or work in my herb garden, I hear my mother say with a nudge, "I told you so."
I can't help but think that if I was confronted with canned food and no opener, I don't know how I would do that. I would like to learn how to do that. Dina Alvarez was born and raised in Greenwich Village, but her parents immigrated here from Cuba in the 1960s, and she still believes they could not have landed in a better place. Dina is a graduate of Hunter College, where she received a bachelor's of film and media communications, and then, ironically, spent most of her working life in corporate America doing nothing remotely close to what she'd imagined. She kept her sanity by freelance writing for small local publications and eventually launched Somos Padres, the first bilingual parenting publication for Latino families in New York City. She's currently at work on an anthology focusing on midlife reinventions, which is set for release later this year. She resides here in New York City with her husband and son and joins us today to read A Cuban Kitchen in Greenwich Village. Please say hello to Dina Alvarez.
At 82, my Cuban mother says her taste buds are off and that she doesn't know what to eat anymore. She has a few health issues, including a thyroid condition and high blood pressure, but the only thing she'll ever complain about is her lack of appetite and frustration over enjoying food, one of the true delights of life, she says. Although she goes out less after a recent fall, she never misses visiting the farmer's market at Abington Square on Saturdays, searching for the freshest ingredients. She may not be able to fully savor those market finds, but her Greenwich Village kitchen, the same one since 1966, still manages to serve up some of the best Cuban fare when she's feeling up to it, just as if she was back in Cuba. I call it muscle memory. Mom immigrated to this country in 1966 with my 5-year-old sister in tow. She didn't know the language, a single person other than my father, or what a cold front felt like until she stepped off that plane on a bitter March day. But the warmth of our kitchen never lacked a hot Cuban meal. While she could have landed in much worse places than Greenwich Village, she was still blindsided by the music, a downtown hippie vibe, along with a dirty subway, hot dog stands, and the smell of pretzels outside Radio City Music Hall. Around the holidays, my mother never veered from her personal menu of lechon asado for Christmas. Roast pork bathed in a garlic and olive oil rub, baked until the skin, scored with a 1/4-inch deep crosshatch pattern, crackled and crunched against our teeth like hard candy. On New Year's Eve, there was seafood paella, and if we were lucky that year, a few lobster claws thrown in for good measure. Dinners on regular days included steaks pounded so thin you could almost see through them, sautéed with onions and tucked into a soft white hero bread, or pork chops served with black beans and sweet plantains. Ropa vieja, the traditional shredded beef dish of Cuba, or picadillo, ground beef meal served over hot white rice, somehow magically appeared within the hour of her arriving home. Even though she had a full-time job at a factory sewing bedwear for Gloria Vanderbilt, in what is now the building that houses Chelsea Market, my mother always managed to have a meal on the table. TV dinners so coveted by my sister and me never had a chance. To my mother's credit, she did eventually graduate to making meatloaf and spaghetti. There was always turkey for Thanksgiving, replete with flan for dessert. My mother no longer cooks for the holidays, but our weekly Sunday afternoon meals entail lunch at either Anton's or Bus Stop Cafe or Mimi's restaurant, all located on Hudson Street near her home of 56 years, where our conversations revolve around how much the neighborhood has changed and her early years in Cuba. In these restaurants, I watch my mother clean off her plate and sip wine like a pro. Taste buds or not, I know the social setting, having someone else do the cooking, and our weekly outings filled with conversation drive her desire to eat. I tell her that her appetite seems just fine and joke that she eats like a horse. She always replies, "In good company, everything has flavor." On wintry days, Mom will invite me upstairs for a meal, the chore of cooking suddenly forgotten. A few days before Thanksgiving, she asked if I could come over so she could show me something. A surprise, she said. She'd made Cuban ajiaco, my favorite meal, an elaborate dish that is half soup, half stew, made with root vegetables, corn on the cob, and dried, curated beef that creates a standout, hearty meal. As I was fawning over her truly delicious and unexpected dinner, she told me, "If I would have told you I was making it, I bet it wouldn't have come out as good." It felt like an old Cuban proverb when she said it. As we sat together eating our Cuban meal, I asked her if she ever regretted leaving her entire family for a new country, waiting 14 years before she ever saw any of them again, and seeing them only a handful of times ever since. "I never thought of going back there and living there again," she said. "This is home." Sitting in the apartment where I grew up, I realized there's nothing a Cuban mother won't do for her daughter, especially in the kitchen. Muscle memory or not, even if she can't taste a single thing. I asked her to make arroz con pollo next time she was inspired to cook. Of course, she said yes.
In addition to being published in various literary magazines and anthologies, Anne Casapini wears many other hats. Having earned her BFA in acting, Anne went on to perform at such far-flung venues as the Woodstock Playhouse and the Bataclan in Paris. She's also been a prop person, a food stylist, an ESL teacher, and voiceover artist, and recently voiced multiple roles in the audiobook The Adventures of Ossie Osprey. Anne sings, dances salsa, and for most of the last 3 decades has honed her skills as a yoga and meditation instructor. Anne lives with her husband, son, and dog here in Tuckahoe, New York, and in her essay, Watching Her, Anne acknowledges just how powerful family memories can be as she and her aging mother find new ways to be together. Please join me in welcoming back Anne Casapini.
Early in October, I picked up my mother and brought her to live with me in my home. I watch her intensely these days. How is her color? Is that a hive? I listen for wheezing. Does she need a higher pillow? Her inhaler? A fresh box of tissues? Awakened by her cough, I listen for an hour, then finally fall back asleep, exhausted. Today, after dinner, she insists on helping clear the table. Unsteady on her feet, she tries to minimize trips to the kitchen, so she stacks her bowl, plate, glass, and silverware and holds on with both hands. She teeters forward. I resist my urge to jump up and help her. On the way, she drops the bowl, chipping it. I pretend not to notice. I listen to a loud phone conversation she is having with Carmen, her last surviving friend, also from Colombia. My stomach tightens when Mom tells her she's been with me for just 3 days. It's really been 3 months. My mother gets bored and agitated if she doesn't have a project, so I suggest she write out a few holiday cards for her grandchildren and her great-grandchildren. I give her a sample greeting that she can just copy, and I address the envelopes. She spends hours writing 4 cards. A large Christmas gift arrives for her. I watch her delighted expression as she unwraps the ribbons and opens the 3-tiered Harry and David boxes filled with fruits, nuts, and chocolates. After examining them for quite a long time and reading and rereading the gift card, she carefully rewraps each item, then closes the boxes and places them on a nearby chair. A few minutes later, she looks at the gifts and asks, "What's in these boxes?" I notice her fingernails have grown too long, so I sit her down and bring over a clipper. She protests. "Puedo hacerlo yo mismo." I can do it myself. I can do my left hand. It's just the right hand I have trouble with. Okay, see, Mama. Let's try the right then. As I hold her frail fingers in mine, her soft skin triggers a clear memory of my mom trimming my nails when I was a child. She'd sit on her shins, sometimes just after her own shower, with a towel turban on her head. I'd sit on her lap with her arms in the sweet scent of shampoo wrapped around me, my forearm tenderly tucked under her elbow. Making conversation is difficult, as Mom's hearing is so bad. She pretends to understand, but she doesn't. So I write her notes instead, on a small whiteboard. On Christmas Day, I write, "Mama, did you enjoy my homemade eggnog last night? I know that that used to be your favorite holiday treat." She answers, "Eggnog? I didn't have any eggnog." We are finding a new daily rhythm. Mid-morning, we have tea and a snack. She calls it medias nueves. Then in mid-afternoon, coffee and a snack, onces. When it's time for another project, I dig out a shoebox full of photos. While I write the date and a caption on the back of each picture, I encourage Mom to place them in a new album. She smiles at my son Liam as a young boy, at how beautiful he was, and places the pictures into the empty pages. She loves looking at photos. Recordar es vivir, she repeats again and again. To remember is to live. She sits in the dining room all afternoon, looking at a photo book I'd made as a gift to her for her birthday, spanning her 98 years. Now I stand in the kitchen, watching her as she caresses the black and white images of her beloved family members who have all passed before her. Her mother, father, and 3 brothers, all gone. Her lips move. She is whispering to them. I see she is closer to them now than to me.
Barbara Espinosa Occhino was born in Cuba. In addition to her writing, she is a multilingual singer and music curator, an enthusiastic advocate for the arts in her community. She also enjoys dancing, tap, jazz, and ballroom, and she teaches entrepreneurship at the college level and volunteers as a student mentor. Barbara is widely published, and she writes both for government and for Fortune 500 companies. In Barbara's story, Hog Wild, we learn how her mom took a traditional Thanksgiving and put her own rather unique, if not completely legal, spin on it. Please welcome Barbara Espinosa Occhino.
Now that I would be hosting Thanksgiving for the family, my Cuban-American mother, a 4-foot, 11-inch power bank of energy and zest, volunteered her advice to ensure everything went spectacularly well. She even tailored a Thanksgiving-themed gold tablecloth that covered my 2 long dining tables. "What are you making for dinner?" she asked, her voice full of hope. "Traditional American food, Mommy, with 2 turkeys and all the trimmings," I replied. "But pavo turkey is so dry," she said. "Aren't you making a fricassee?" Fricassee is a hearty Cuban stew with Caribbean seasonings. "No, Mommy, the turkeys will be roasted in the oven." Her silence and deep breaths let me know this would not do. No one looked forward more to Thanksgiving than my mom. Around Labor Day, she would start fussing over the flights from Florida to Connecticut. She had a hard-earned reputation for lively parties, with an abundance of savory Cuban dishes, games, and dancing that lasted from the early evening until the wee hours. "Aren't you roasting a pig?" she asked. It was a centuries-old Cuban custom to marinate a pig for days and then slowly roast it in an outdoor pit until its tender, juicy meat fell off the bone and the skin became a crispy treat. There just wasn't a gathering without a lechon asado. Even when I said there would be more than enough food, Mommy continued urging me to scout for a roasted pig vendor. They were widely available in the Miami area, as you might imagine. Not so much in the New England suburbs. As my patience grew thin, I stressed, and stressed again and again, that I would honor an American Thanksgiving menu. The Monday before the holiday, I picked her up at the airport. She hated the cold winter, so I knew she would overpack her extra large baggage with enough winter clothing to stay for a month. Anything under 60 degrees Fahrenheit was freezing. So I hoisted the heavy suitcase and nudged it, one step at a time, to the second-floor guest bedroom, huffing and puffing and silently complaining about her overpacking. I risked a hernia as I lifted the bag to the top of the dresser. "I can do it," she explained as I unzipped the suitcase. But it was too late. Instead of the usual wrapped gifts, atop layers of fashionable clothes and shoes. When I reached inside, my hand felt something hard and cold. There, beneath layers of aluminum foil and plastic wrap, lay the mystery gift. Taking up the entire length of the suitcase, a frozen pig. Stretched out as if in a yoga Tadasana pose. I screeched and she laughed. How I'd store the beast in the fridge and revamp my oven itinerary to roast 2 turkeys plus the pig left me baffled. The guests arrive and I braced myself for their bewildered comments. My father-in-law always opened the oven to inspect the roasting turkeys, but this time, his jaw dropped at the sight of a smirking Cuban pig lounging and basting in the roasting pan. Everyone wanted to know how she managed to get it past the airport's security scanners. My original plan for the plane was to dress it like a baby. said my mother as laughter filled the room. Then we all proceeded to devour every juicy morsel of lechon asado, along with traditional stuffing and gravy, sweet potatoes, cornbread, cranberry sauce pies, and Mommy's favorite, sweet Spanish nougat.
John Pielmeier has been entertaining audiences for decades, in the theater, on film and television, as well as through his several novels, including Hook's Tale and The Locked Door. But he started with playwriting, no less than Agnes of God. Since then, he's had a number of plays on Broadway and more than 25 film, television movies, and miniseries produced. His stage adaptation of The Exorcist will be coming to New York next season, and he has won, in alpha order, Kami, Christopher, Edgar, and Gemini Awards, and was nominated for an Emmy and a Globe. In his essay, We All Knew Louise, John realizes a bit late that even the best laid plans can not only go awry, but turn a bit off key. Please help me welcome back John Leonard Pielmeier.
I'm afraid I told my therapist many years ago that I won't survive my mother's death. My mother Louise and I were very close. Her first child died in her arms, and I spent my life trying to fill that hole. When I was 7, I sobbed to her, "I don't want you ever to leave me." I think I meant to say just the opposite. I didn't ever want to leave her. She died a few weeks before her 93rd birthday. We'd said pretty much everything that needed to be said to each other by then, and both of us were ready to let the other one go. When my sister called me with the news of her death, I shed a few tears, nothing more. My 20 years of therapy had worked. Almost. There were two things that frightened me as her funeral approached: the shock of first laying eyes on her in an open casket, and the agony of her burial service. Would I break down, faint, drop dead from inconsolable grief? What I didn't count on was my mother. She gave me several parting and surprising gifts. She died in Florida, and as prearranged, her body was flown back to Pennsylvania to be buried beside my father. When I walked into the funeral parlor, braced for total collapse, I found myself facing a dead stranger. The Florida embalmer had no idea what my mother looked like, and what he created resembled a woman I'd never seen before in my life. Wherever my mother is now, I thought, she ain't here. On the night of her wake, in a room filled with friends and relatives, a cousin tapped me on the shoulder. "Your old girlfriend wants to say hello," he said. When I was 6, I fell madly in love with another first grader named Jennifer, who shared my mother's maiden name. I was afraid that even if we were distant cousins, our marriage would be forbidden and possibly criminal. She moved away when I was 9, and I never recovered. But there she was, 52 years later, come not to pay respects to Mother, but because her father was laid out in the parlor next door. I hastened across the hall, and on seeing Jennifer, my heart began racing as if I were 6 once again, and in love. That's when I nearly collapsed. My wife enjoyed the moment immensely. I think my mother did too. Later that night, the priest who was to say my mother's funeral mass arrived to lead us in prayer. Someone had once told him, I imagined, that he had a mellifluous voice. And when he began, "Our Father, who art in heaven," it was all I could do to keep from laughing. He sounded very much like the Reverend Lovejoy on The Simpsons, only this guy wasn't a cartoon. Well, not really. Afterwards, he came up to me and he said mellifluously, "I found a singer for your mother's service." Indeed, he had. The next morning, as my wife and I marched into the church, we heard what sounded like a 200-year-old ostrich belting out Amazing Grace. Off-key doesn't begin to describe her warbling soprano. "She has 100% confidence," my wife whispered to me, "and 0% talent." We sat in the front row, bowing our heads and biting our lips as our shoulders shook with laughter. Anyone arriving at the back of the church must have assumed we were sobbing in inconsolable grief. When it came time for the eulogy, the priest began mellifluously, "Some of us knew Louise." I wanted to shout, "We all knew Louise except you." But the highlight of the service arrived later when the organist began to play Gounod's Ave Maria. Inadvertently, I let out an audible, "Oh no." My wife reassured me, "She won't sing this." Boy, was she wrong.
Angela Derecas Taylor was raised in a restaurant family in New York City. By the way, one of the threads that's running through, and I'm noticing there's a whole lot of folks here who were like Greenwich Village, restaurant, Cuban, yoga. We got a lot of consistent things here. Her subsequent 20-year catering and event planning career offered her some unmatched culinary adventures. She has stirred the pots in many enviable venues, including exotic resorts, historic hotels, luxury yachts, and even on a transatlantic sailboat. Midlife, Angela changed careers and traded cooking for Madonna for troubleshooting for the mayor of New Rochelle, a role that she's enjoyed for the last 17 years. To keep herself and all those around her from losing their cool, she is also a certified yoga instructor. And by the way, Angela and Ann Casapini will be leading a beginner stretch and breathe yoga in the gallery right after the show. In addition to Writers Read, Angela has shared her stories with Story Boom and The Moth, and she's the mother of 2 adult sons. She lives in New York on City Island with her husband, Tom, in the house where he grew up. And I'm pleased to welcome Angela back to our stage for Mom's Big Move. Please say hello to Angela Derecas Taylor.
My sister Christine kept our mother alive for 87 years, whereas I managed to kill Mom in just 6 months. Christine's the good daughter. The one who stayed close to family, assuming the role of caretaker. I'm the bold one, who separated at 16 with no interest in adhering to the matriarchal demands of mi familia. So when, at 87 years old, Mom announced she was leaving her lifelong Greenwich Village neighborhood, close to my sister, and moving into a senior residence in New Rochelle, close to me, Christine was devastated over Mom's big move. I was bewildered, because for most of my life, I wished my mother would just drop dead. While I was off gallivanting, Mom had been hospitalized for various medical issues 17 times over a 20-year period.
Each time, Christine remained stalwart by Mom's hospital bedside, determined to keep our mother from the Grim Reaper, indefinitely. Mom needs an advocate, was Christine's mantra. Everyone dies eventually, was mine. After the move, Mom and I got into a groove. During routine visits to CVS, I relished the attention of strangers and their "what a good daughter" looks as I escorted Mom in her rollator. On evening visits, we'd watch the Murder Channel together. Sometimes I'd join her for lunch where she'd show me off. "My daughter works for the mayor." "Shh, don't tell them that. They'll start complaining about potholes." I was conflicted, feeling guilt about Mom abandoning my sister, yet validated by the newfound bond with my mother. I fantasized about all we would share in the future. Then she had that effing stroke. This time, I stood sentinel at Mom's hospital bedside, silently bargaining with the Almighty not to grant my lifelong wish. I didn't mean it. Please, don't take her from me. When they said it was time to insert a feeding tube, Mom shook her head. Enough. One night, while under hospice care in my home, Mom cried out. I rushed to her side, morphine tincture in hand. She pushed it away. "I saw Uncle Bruno," she said, referring to her 20 years dead older brother. "He said it's nice there. He's waiting for me." The next morning, as I approached her bedside, Mom gazed out the window. "My only regret," she said, "is that you and I didn't do this sooner." I held her hand. Together, we stared out the window like we had all the time in the world. Mom took a deep breath. Instinctively, I joined her. Then another. In and out. One more, and then she was gone. "Mom? Mom!" I went to the kitchen. "Mom's dead," I said to my husband, not really believing the words coming from my mouth. He guided me back to her. She looked angelic, glowing. The post-stroke suffering lifted. I raised my phone, poised to take her picture. I didn't want to lose the mother I had just so recently found. "Don't do that," my husband said, removing the phone from my hands. In these 10 years since Mom's death, Christine and I have developed a strong sisterly bond. We've talked a lot about our different relationships with our mother. She recognizes the importance for me and Mom to have had those last 6 months together, to get to know and love each other, to forgive each other, to heal our lifelong broken relationship. And I honor Christine for being the daughter who fulfilled the caretaker role for decades, giving me the freedom to find my way in life. Despite my absence, Mom knew I was the daughter with the strength to let her go in the manner she wanted. Being present with my mother as she was dying remains the most difficult thing I have ever had to do. It was also the most precious and healing gift we gave to each other, one that will stay with me forever. I suppose I didn't need that weird photo after all.
Margarita Meyendorff, or Morka, as she is known professionally, was born displaced in a refugee camp in Germany, far from the opulence of Imperial Russia that was her family's homeland before a series of wars changed everything. She's performed as an actress, dancer, musician, and storyteller at venues throughout the United States and Europe, and her memoir, DP, Displaced Person, is now being translated into Russian. Morka is also the author of Flipping the Bird, a series of short stories based on her remarkable journeys. We're delighted she traveled from her Hudson Valley home today to join us again this afternoon to close our special Mother's Day program with Rendezvous, a story of a mother and a daughter in this world and beyond. I present to you Morka.
I arrived first, brimming with anticipation. I had waited a long time for this encounter. To calm myself, I order a glass of chilled rosé and a shot of cold Stolichная vodka for her, and I wait. My mind is filled with our past. Why can't I recall what she called me in my childhood? Murka? Murik? Never Murichka, the most endearing. Did I ever take her to a nice restaurant where she could be pampered and spoiled with delicious food and drink? Never. Tonight, I will lavish and spoil her with a high-end, delicious French dinner, the best wine, the best vodka. Will she be angry? Affectionate? Will we have enough make-up time? I notice her when she first appears at the entrance of the cafe. She is standing and waiting for the maitre d' to show her to our table. She has on an unremarkable gray coat and a gray chapeau that covers her gray hair. She was never very tall. Her shoulders droop a little more now, and she clutches her pocketbook as she searches the cafe for a familiar face. I beckon her to our table. I stand up as she comes towards me. We stare at each other, not knowing exactly what to say. Then we embrace. The embrace is awkward, as there weren't too many embraces back then. She takes off her coat and hat and sits down, lights a cigarette, and looks at me as if to say, "Why did you bring me here?" She is as I remember her. She is dressed in a white blouse and black skirt below her knees, simple but still elegant. Her gray, thick, wavy hair is pulled back with brown plastic combs, and her pale oval face is covered with wrinkles. I see that she's made an effort and has applied some mascara and put on red lipstick, but she can never hide that perpetual sadness which permeates her entire being. Even when she was young and beautiful and her skin soft and unmarked, she had that sad, faraway look. She looks beautiful to me. The last time I saw her, she was in an alcoholic daze, trying to focus on a bridge game with my father, my future husband, and me. In her eyes, I was getting married and doing the right thing for the first time in my life. I knew I was losing my soul. 5 years later, I was living in Minneapolis with my husband and 2-year-old daughter when my mother fell on the floor with a cigarette in one hand and a shot of vodka in the other. A week later, she died of a massive stroke. I break the silence. "Mama," I say in Russian, the language we share. "Можем ли мы начать все сначала? Can we start over?" She puts out her cigarette, swallows the shot of vodka, then takes my hands in hers. "Можем." We can. We hold hands and look at each other. This is not an apparition. It is Mama. I see tears well up in her eyes and start to run down her cheeks. We talk, we cry, we laugh. She shares her poetry. I sing a gypsy song to her, our favorite. This is my legacy, what she has passed on to me. Her need to write, to sing, to create, to survive. Was it a dream? A hallucination? Psychic manifestation? I don't know. I know it happened, and it seemed as real as this present moment. It is beyond words, just feeling. Mama stands up, puts on her coat and hat. There's a long, warm embrace, and then she's gone. До свидания, Мурочка, I hear her say. Until next time.
Will all the writers come join me on stage? We built Writers Read around live performances like this one. And I'm proud to be here with this group of fine writers. I'm proud of what a very small group of committed, unpaid volunteers can actually accomplish and continues to build with me. As I explained earlier, there are lots of moving parts to this organization. We have room and need for volunteers or advisory team members to help us steer it, especially in the areas of marketing and finance. So if you're interested, please talk to me during the intermission. You can always reach me with thoughts or suggestions at ed@writersread.org. I hope that you will follow our podcast and stay in touch by joining our email list. And we will be producing a lunchtime show in Bryant Park on Wednesday, June 28th, and we'll be back on this stage on September 10th. So please remember, do take your program with you. Please share it with another writer in your life. And please do consider a charitable and tax-deductible gift to Writers Read to help us grow. We can't do what we do without you, and that's why this round of applause from us is for you. If you enjoyed yourself today, please do tell your friends about us, and we're going to do this one last thing, which is to take a bow. We haven't rehearsed this, but I think we can swing it. Come on.